Hey CE fam, we're so glad that you're here for CE Online. I can't wait to see what God's gonna do today. He always shows up in amazing ways. So if you got any questions, prayer requests, or just wanna connect with us, go to churchexperience.tv/connect or scan the QR code on the screen. And hey, while you're here, why don't you go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you never miss out on what God's doing through CE. We love you, we're praying for you, and we're so glad that you're part of the CE fam.
I've always believed that we were put here for a reason, that there is a path, somehow a divine plan for all of us and for each one of us. And I've also always believed that America was set apart in a special way, that it was put here between the oceans to be found by a certain kind of people based on a quality that these people had, but that they came from every corner of the world. And a country then was created by men and women who came not for gold, but mainly in search of God. They would be free people, living under the law with faith in their Maker and in their future. It's been written that the most sublime figure in American history was George Washington on his knees in the snow at Valley Forge. He personified a people who knew that it was not enough to depend on their own courage and goodness, that they must also seek help from God, their Father and Preserver. Where did we begin to lose sight of that noble beginning, of our conviction that standards of right and wrong do exist and must be lived up to? Do we really think that we can have it both ways? That God will protect us in a time of crisis even as we turn away from Him in our day-to-day life? It's time to realize, I think, that we need God more than He needs us.
Good morning. It's been a wonderful morning, and I want to start off with a story that happened many years ago. So Jen and I went to a college in South Africa called Rhodes University, right? It was a university named after Cecil John Rhodes, and it was in Grahamstown, which I think has changed its name to like Makanda now. It was about a 10-hour drive from where I lived, and so Jen and I were at Rhodes together, and my parents went to Rhodes, and so it was like I wanted to go there, and it was really cool. It was quite close to the school that I went to, which was a couple hours away. And I started studying. My degree was going to be in like psychology and things like that, right? And then I realized, no, I wanted to do more into business. And so then I pivoted, or as Larry would say, pivot. I pivoted around to do more business, and they said, okay, cool, these are the courses you have to catch up on. So I did all the courses that I needed to do. And when I'd finished, I thought I'd finished, and they said, well, you've got 1 6-month course left to do to get your degree. I said, well, I don't want to come back, I want to start, working. I don't want to come back for 6 months to do one course, usually do a whole multiple. They said, well, listen, you can do it through, there's a college in South Africa called UNISA. It's a distance learning university. And they said you can do some courses through that's equivalent to this 6-month course. You can just do those. And once you've given us those marks, you'll still get your degree from us. I'm like, perfect. So they gave me that. And UNISA is massive. They say there's about 400,000 students in 130 countries. It's all distance learning. And so it's a massive university. And so they gave me the courses I need to do. And I remember the one course that I did, I started studying it, and it was early 2000s, right? Which felt like it was yesterday, but it was like early 2000s, and they basically said to write the exam, you have to do the test. They said the test doesn't really count for much. You can get 0 for it, but you have to do the test to be able to write the exam. And the year that I did this one, they said, listen, we've just launched that you can do this test. It was all multiple choice questions. You can do that test, multiple choice questions online. Before you'd have to, write it on a piece of paper, then post it in, and they would do it. And they said, you can literally get 0 for it. You can just literally select A on every single one, but you need to have done it to do the exam. So, okay, cool. But I'm thinking, I want to do this online. So I studied and, chose the different ones, and I did it properly and click submit, and thinking, we're all done. And then a few weeks later, before the exam, I get a notification to say, we don't have proof that you did the test, so you can't do the exam. So I phoned them straight away, and I said, but I did it. They said, well, do you have? There was no confirmation emails at the time. This was early on. There was, I didn't even know how to. I don't know if you could do a screenshot. I had nothing to show that I'd done it. So they said, well, if you can't prove that you did it, you didn't do it. And I said, but I did. I remember doing it. I remember clicking submit. But, nowadays you click submit and you'll get an email notification. You'll get all these different things. But at the time, it was so new that I didn't have any proof that I did it. And so they said, well, because you don't have proof, it's as if it didn't happen. And I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense. But I was annoyed. I had to, if I've got nothing to show that I did it, in their eyes, I didn't do it. And so I had to do it the next semester. And the truth is that important moments need reminders, right? That's why we frame certificates. That's why we celebrate anniversaries. That's why we take photos. And my wife loves taking photos because it's a wonderful reminder, right? And Facebook does this. Like when it'll say on this day, like 5 years ago, I remember that day. It was like yesterday. That's why we take lots of photos. That's why as nations we build monuments, right? Is because we understand something deep down, is that if we don't intentionally remember, we'll eventually forget. And if we forget our story, we forget our identity. And so happy birthday, America. 250 years. Awesome. I love it. It was so cool to be here, and fireworks and friends, and just, it was so wonderful. And that's why I think it was so important as a nation to celebrate that 250 years, right? It was the Declaration of Independence. We've been to the, Rotundo? In Rotundo, we've been there. I think every American should go to DC. There was so much history there. All the museums, I absolutely loved it. The family loved it. I think there's just so much history there. And I remember going into that place where you've got the Declaration of Independence, you've got the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, and it just felt so sacred. The history that has gone there, and you see in this piece of paper that these guys signed, 250 years, beautiful. I love it, right? And you look in there and you're saying, wow, there's 250 years of history, of sacrifice, 250 years of people believing in something and building something bigger than themselves, right? And if I'm honest, when America celebrates, you guys know how to celebrate, right? We're not just going to do some fireworks. We're going to do fireworks proper. We're not going to just have a little parade. We're going to have a proper parade. Like when America does something, you guys want to go big with it. I love it. I love that, right? And that's why we need reminders, right? That's why everyone was celebrating and remembering. It's because we need times like that to remind us of how we got here. Because if we if we don't remind ourselves, we will forget. And that's why Joshua 4 is so important. In the beginning of the year, we spent a lot of time in the book of Joshua. I hope you guys remember, right? And we talked about all the different aspects of the book of Joshua. We started at the beginning where he basically starts off the book of Joshua. God says to Joshua, listen, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now you have to be strong and courageous. And he mentions it 3 times, be strong and courageous, because he knew that Joshua needed to be strong and courageous. He's basically saying, the season with Moses is gone. This is a new season, and so things are going to be different, right? We talked about crossing over. Like with Moses, it parted before they walked in. Now with Joshua, they had to step in before it parted. He's doing things differently now. When he talked about consecration, we talked about crossing over, we talked about the commander of the Lord's army, which I believe is Jesus incarnate. That whole discussion that he had, we talked about Jericho, we talked about the defeated Ai, and we talked about all these wonderful things, obedience and taking the land, but we skipped past this one part. We skipped past the stones, as I say, right? Because God there was this beautiful miracle that happened, right? It's one of the greatest miracles in Israel's history, and God pauses afterwards to say, go pick up 12 stones. What? Pick up some 12 stones. Why should I be? This is all in Joshua 3 and 4 and around about there. I might not read all of it verbatim, but I encourage you guys to read this story, because when I read scripture, I like to picture it. I like to envision it. And can you just imagine there's we can gloss over this aspect of the story because there's so much happening, but I'm thinking if God paused the nation to send 12 guys to go pick up stones, if it's important enough for them to pause and look at and do this, it's important for us to do that as well. A couple of years ago, this church didn't exist. There was no Sunday service. There was no worship team. There was no space to meet. There was no kids, kids facilities or kids ministry. There was none of that. There was just a dream, a calling, and a handful of people. I remember the first time we ever met as just kind of talking about church was with Chris and Ezra and Larry and Alicia, right? And other friends of ours, just meeting around our dining room table, talking about this dream that God had given me about starting a church in this area. And I was wondering at the time, will this work? Will anyone come? Will people stay? What if it doesn't work out? What if things don't go according to plan? What if all that? But here we are many years later, and lives are being changed, and discipleship is happening, and I mean, just this year we've done 5 weddings, which has been beautiful, and there's baptisms, and there's life, and there's babies being born. I've done my part. You guys need to do your part, right? There's just life happening, and it's beautiful, right? And last week I kind of mentioned it as well, that we, as a church, we had a legacy defining moment, because there's a very real possibility that we are gifted this land, and it's exciting. The whole theme of Joshua, when we were doing Joshua, was if God is leading us, the unknown is not unsafe. And that's where I feel at the moment. I mentioned it last week, is kind of, if God is leading us, there's so much unknowns that still need to happen, right? But if God is leading us, the unknown is not unsafe. And so we're at this moment of this beautiful time as a church where we could, there's a very, very real possibility that we are gifted this land that we're meeting. And I think that's not normal. As a 3-year-old church started by African immigrants, that's not normal, right? That's not luck. That's just the faithfulness of God. And I don't want to rush past this moment. I want to pick up some stones. And the problem is that we as human beings, we forget very easily, right? I have a question for you. Is when last did you do your bed linen? When last did you wash your bed linen, right? Your pillowcases, your sheets and all that. When last did you wash your linen? In the first service, someone like, today. I'm like, you did it today before church? That's impressive. Some others might be like, I don't know, right? In the Blackbeard Palace, it's once a week. We do our linen once a week. And every single time Jane says, we need to do our linen, I'm like, already? She's like, yeah, we did it a week ago. A week? That wasn't a week ago. That was like 2 days ago. No, one was last week, whatever it was. I'm like, I don't know, does time go quicker the older you get? Because it felt like it was yesterday. But now I'm doing it again. And I'm like, I don't even know how we got here, right? I really felt like we just did it. But I'll obviously forget. And I don't get me started on laundry, right? Laundry is the same thing. Laundry is one of the mysteries of just the more you do, the more it just keeps coming, right? And you're thinking, what? How did this happen? It's like, am I doing my neighbor's washing? Because every time I look, there's something else. How much clothing does Rebecca have? Is she like a model? Like, does she just change whenever she wants? Because the more stuff I'm hanging, we've never used our whole life, really. We've never used a tumble dryer. And so even now we don't use it. We bought like a clothesline and we've put it up in our garage, and we hang it up there. So I'm like hanging stuff up. I'm like, how much clothing do you guys have? It's like, this is impossible. And you know what the crazy thing is? It's like, you're never done, right? You might, maybe some of you, it's like Sunday's our day to do washing and you do it all. But then what happens on Monday? Surprise! There's a whole lot more. And you're like, how did this happen? You know? It's crazy, right? But it's one of great mysteries. And I think, you know, it's why we do this is because we forget. We forget how much laundry we've already done. We forget all the stuff that we've already done. We forget when it happened. And I think spiritually we do the same thing. We forget how far God has taken us. We forget the prayers He's answered. We forget the rivers He's carried us through. We forget His faithfulness. And God says, I think that's why it's so important. Build memorials. Build a reminder, because our faith has a short memory. And memorials help us to remember. And in Joshua chapter 3 and 4, I encourage you guys to read it. It's this, the Jordan is at flood stage. It's this massive river. This is a dangerous, angry river. This is a huge river. It's at flood stage, which means it's elevated. This is like, you don't want to go anywhere near it. There's a lot. And this is what's holding the Israelites back to the promised land. This is, they've wandered in the desert for 40 years, right? I think they said if they just went the right direction, it would have taken them, I think, 12 days. I might be mistaken. 10 days. Like a lot shorter than 40 years, right? And so for 40 years, they're around there because 10 out of the 12 spies thought they looked like grasshoppers against giants. I saw this picture that Jen sent me of Ben. You know Ben that comes to our church? They just arrived back from Iceland last night. And Ben's a big guy, but he went to a gym there of a guy who does like one of those like world's strongest man. And Ben looked like a grasshopper next to this man. This man was huge, right? And Ben's not a small guy, but this guy was huge. And I'm thinking that's exactly what some of the Israelites, you know, the other 10 spies, they're like, no, we like grasshoppers. So for 40 years, they wandered around the desert. And now they finally, they can see the promised land. Between them and the promised land is the Jordan River. And God says to them, well, we covered this, you know, a couple months ago. It's like, as soon as you step in, as soon as the priests step in with the Ark of the Covenant, the waters will stop flowing. It's not before, as. I'm like, whew, I liked it when it's before, right? I like it when, Lord, I'll take that step if you show me. Yeah, that might have worked with Moses, but not with you, Joshua. I want them to take a step, and as they take a step, the waters stop. And now the priests are in the middle of the river. I don't know if they can see the water. I don't know if it's right there. You know, I don't know how it works, but maybe they can hear the water being there. And while they're in the middle of the river, on dry ground, the Israelites walk into the promised land. And they say approximately 2 million of them are walking. Now, that's not a small crowd. That's a lot of people. So they're there in the middle, faithful, and all the Israelites get to the other side. When all of them have finally got there, God says to Joshua in chapter 4, he gathered together them and he said, I want you to choose one person from each tribe of Israel, and I want each one of them to go back to the middle where the priests are with the Ark of the Covenant. I want them each to pick up a stone. Well, we've just come from there. We're on dry ground now. We're on the other side. We're in the promised land. And now you want us to go back into the middle of the river where we've just come from, where at any moment the river can maybe start flowing again. You want me to go there and pick up a stone? If I was one of those 12 men, I'd be like, Joshua, are you sure? Like, can't I just pick up a stone from this side of the river? Like, this is a nice stone right here. Can't I just pick this up? No, go to the middle of the river and pick up one from there. I love it that he says it. He literally says, God says in chapter 4, go back and pick one up from the middle. And I think there's because some testimonies can only be found in the middle of obedience. Like God will tell us one thing and we're like, yeah, but I know this is what you want me to do, but can't I do something that's kind of like that, but kind of not? You ever been there? where you feel so in your spirit, like this is what God wants me to do, and you kind of start negotiating with God, like, I like your idea, but like if I could just do a little bit of it, it kind of fits my schedule better, or it kind of, have you ever been there? I have. Where I start negotiating with God, and God's like, "Yeah, okay, funny one," you know. It's like, they said, go back to the middle, because I think sometimes there's testimonies that are only found in the middle of our obedience. And then there's this part of it which I think we sometimes gloss over is the priests. The priests are still there. They stayed in the river. They were there the whole time while these 2 million people were walking across, and that would have taken a long time, right? They stay in there. Everyone else is safely on the other side, and the priests are still staying there. They're still obeying, still trusting, still waiting, still holding the ark, the presence of God. They're still there. And I wonder if any of them looked around at each other and be like, can we go now? Are we allowed to go? No, but they were faithful, which I love. They you know, maybe some of us, we felt like that. Everyone else is moving. Everyone else has had breakthrough. Everyone else is in the promised land, and here we are stuck. And I want to encourage you, the priests weren't forgotten there in the middle. They were positioned. Sometimes God does his best work while we stand in faithfully where he told us to stand. You might be standing thinking, I'm not moving forward. I'm watching everyone else move forward. I'm watching everyone else advance. But God wants me here, and the temptation is for us to take that step and go somewhere where we're trying to force our idea onto God. And I love this because it's like they were staying there. They weren't forgotten, but they were positioned right there because God was going to send 12 men back. And so they had to be there. So even if you feel like you're in a space where you feel like you're not moving forward, you're not forgotten, you're being positioned. And so trust God in that process. And then I love this aspect of, it says that he picked them up. Each of you should take the stone on your shoulder according to the number of tribes. Like, this isn't just a small pebble. This is a large rock that these guys are having to carry over their shoulder. And I could just picture these men picking one up and carrying to the other side. And maybe they're starting to realize the significance of what they're doing. Maybe they're starting to realize, wow, this is not just a rock. This is our story. This is our testimony, because we're going to layer it up there. And this is going to be a beautiful memorial to kind of explain what we've done, because he carries on to say in verse 6, he says, in the future, when your children ask you, I love it that he says when, not if. Look, God doesn't tell them, like, listen, if the kids ask, if the next generation ask. I love it that he starts off like when, because every generation will ask questions, right? Just have a child, you know that they ask questions, right? And it's like, what? There's so many questions. Like, Siri, can you answer this question? Or, I was joking with someone yesterday. I'm like, just say, go ask your mom, you know. Like, if you don't have the answers. But I love it that it says, like, when your children ask, what do they mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. I love it that he's saying, like, listen, when the generation asks, why are these stones here? We'll tell them this is where the miracle happened. Tell them that this is why it's here, right? And it's the same, right? The next generation will ask questions. How did we get here? How did this church begin here? Why did we get here? How did this happen? And God is saying, like, be ready to tell your story. You know, I could just picture a generation later, there's a man walking with his son there, and he sees these stones, and the son asks his dad, what do these stones mean? And Dad will be like, hey, let me tell you a story. You know, we had no home as Israelites. We had no home. We had no land. We had no future. And God promised this land for us where we find ourselves in now. He promised a land for us, but we had to cross this river, this massive river that's here. We had to cross it, and he stopped the water. He stopped the water. Isn't that insane? He stopped the water and he made a way. He kept his promises. And so these stones become a reminder, a testimony of the goodness of God and his promises that came through. And I think as a church, we stand in our own Joshua 4 moment, right? Because maybe one day in the future, someone will ask, like, how did we get here as a church in the future? And you'll be like, right, well, listen. There were these African immigrants. There was 4 of them. Then the American joined them, and they just arrived with their bags, and they just started meeting people in the community, and And then we started renting this place, and then it hopefully became ours. And there were people that sacrificed, there were people that served, there were people that gave, there were people that trusted God when they couldn't see it. There were people that said yes, even if it was going to be a hard yes. Those are our stones. Friends, for me, this isn't just about a property. This is about legacy. This is about obedience. This is about trusting God in the next chapter of our life, because crossing the Jordan River for the Israelites wasn't the end of their story. It wasn't like, and they lived happily ever after. That was the beginning of their story. There's great victories in Jericho, but then there's also hard realities with the defeated Ai, when Joshua thought, I can do it in my own strength, and he didn't inquire of the Lord before that. And so there's highs and lows coming to them, but this crossing over was just the beginning, right? And so there was still lots happening in front of them, but the stones were a reminder that if God has brought us this far, He's not going to leave us now, right? And 3 years ago as a church, we stepped into the river, right? And every miracle that we've seen since then is been on the other side of obedience. And I really believe that God is inviting us to trust Him more, to take that step and to just believe in Him, believe in His goodness, and trust Him even more than obey Him more courageously, right? Because sometimes let's be honest, we can get comfortable in our faith, right? That was my message a couple of weeks ago. We can just become comfortable and kind of go through the motions, right? And I think there's times and there's moments where God is like saying, I need you to take that step. I need you to trust me more. I need you to get out and just trust me with what I'm inviting you to be a part of. And my hope is that we will. Every single one of us. That's my hope. Is that we can all see what God is doing in the life of the church. And sometimes for me, if I'm honest, sometimes it can be so easy to kind of focus on the things that God hasn't done yet. Have you ever been there? Like Lord, like this is the shopping list that I have of the prayers that you haven't answered yet. And we can kind of like go through that. And then what I have to be reminded that sometimes I just take a step back and I look at the story that God has for me in the last few years since being in America. And I'm just like, oh wow. The fact that we are still a young, early church, that I'm still learning the culture more every single day. The fact that we even at the place that we find ourselves where we could be gifted this land, it's so astounding to me that we're even having that conversation, right? Like that's not normal. That this is not the normal story for a church plant, right? And yet here we are, 3 years where it might be like, here's some land. We're going to gift it to you. That's not normal. And it's beautiful. And so I wanted to spend just this morning to just remind ourselves, to remind of the goodness of what He's done for us. You know, the last few years for me have been just a beautiful story of there's been highs and there's been lows. Let's be honest, right? It's not in my notes, but I was thinking about it this morning. On Friday, we used to have a family or a guy that used to come into the church, Anthony and his son, Gio, who he adopted, him and his wife, and they lived far away, and so he would come. They were so faithful. They would come every Friday morning and clean the church, and that was just what they wanted to do. And Gio, he was their adopted son, and I'd give him such a big bear hug. When I see him, we just give each other a big bear. He was a big guy. I don't know if you guys remember him. And give him such a big hug. And they were just a wonderful family. And then they wanted to go to church together that was closer to them, which I completely understand. And so we blessed them and we said all the best. And we would still stay in contact. And then the wife phones Jen on Friday and says, he's gone. He woke up, he was having chest pains. By the time the ambulance came, he was gone. And so Gio phones last night and he says, Pastor Warren, that's how he'd call me, like with a southern accent. Pastor Warren, like how you did. Pastor Warren. He's like, I miss him. Like, yeah, Gio, I'm sorry. And in that moment, I'm just praying to the Holy Spirit, like, Lord, give me wisdom, because I don't just want to be like, yeah, Gio, time heals, right? Like, you'll be fine. Like, don't worry. because I've been there where my dad's gone and then I've missed him. So I know that feeling. I'm like, gee, I'm so sorry. He's like, yeah, Pastor Warren, I walk past his bed and he's not there, and I'm hoping that he will be, but he's just not. He's gone, and I miss him, and he's just. I couldn't sleep last night because there's just so much going on in my mind. I don't know why it happened and all this, and I'm trying to just comfort him. And eventually, I was thinking about this, about reminders of why God told them to build this of the 12 stones to remind them of the goodness of God. And so I said, Gia, you know what I'd love you to do? I said, Gia, why don't you, every time a memory comes about your dad, I want you to write it down. It could be memories just the two of you had. It could be fun things you guys did together. But I want you to write it down, because those memories. I don't want you to forget him, right? He might not be here anymore, but he's still in here in your memory, right? And so if you write those down, at least you've got it. And whenever you feel sad, you can look back and be like, yo, I remember that time when me and my dad, he took me to the baseball game. They always took us to sports. Like, it was so much fun. And then it just gives you a bit of comfort. So I'm like, I know he's not with you anymore, but his memory can live on. Thank you. That's them. They were so faithful. They would come every Friday and clean the church. There's Gio and Anthony. Oh, Lord Jesus, comfort them. Bless that family. And that's what, like this in Joshua, he's like, I want you to build this to remind you of where God has carried you through, right? All that wandering, all that, and now the first thing you're going to do when you get into the promised land is to go back to the river that you just crossed and build a memorial to remind you. And so that when the future generations come and say, why are these stones here? I'm going to say, well, this is what God did. It was a miracle. And sometimes we can forget, right? Because we're very easy as human beings. We forget, right? And same with us. What do these stones mean, right? It means that God is faithful. Maybe for you, it's this morning is an invitation to trust Him for the first time. Maybe this morning is kind of a realization, a surrender of an aspect of your life that you've been holding on to. Maybe for some it's to be generous. Maybe for some it's to serve. Maybe for some it's to join the mission of like, Lord, I love what you're doing in the life of this church, and I want to help in what you're doing here. And maybe for some it's just like, Lord, I don't know what the future holds, but I know He holds the future, so I'm going to trust you through it, right? And so this is what I'd like to do. We're going to do communion. I want us to think of what stones are we holding on to? What step of obedience has God been whispering to you lately? Maybe there's aspects of your life that you're still holding on to because I don't know, you feel like God hasn't come through. You feel like it's been so long. I feel weary of trusting Him again. Whatever that is, I pray that this moment, and I really hope that this is a holy moment for you. For me, this is just something that we do. This is a real holy, special moment in remembrance of Him. And so can we stand together? So here's my invitation. What's your next step, friends? Is it trusting God for the first time? Is it finally surrendering a part of your life that you've been holding on to? Maybe it's saying, Lord, I want to help. I want to build what God is doing here. You know, you might say, Lord, I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds the future. I was thinking, and I was praying to God, and I was like saying, Lord, what does my stone say? Like, we're all building something. We're all building memorials. What does mine say? What markers am I leaving behind? We all leave behind something what matters most to us. Some of our stones might say success, comfort, achievement, busyness, fear, control. Then I was thinking, if my kids look at all the stones of my life, and what story would those stones tell? Would they say, oh, my mom and my dad loved Jesus? Would it say they trusted God? Would it say they lived for things that mattered forever? Or would our kids say, yeah, they were busy, but I don't know what they were building? Maybe today some of us need to admit that we've placed some stones in the wrong places. We've built monuments that won't last. That's why communion is so powerful. Because He invited us to this memorial He said, do this in remembrance of me. In other words, don't forget this stone, don't forget this, don't forget the cross, don't forget grace, don't forget what matters most. And the cross reminds us, it's a beautiful reminder, that when we've built things in the wrong place, when we've focused on the wrong things, when we've chased after the wrong thing, the cross reminds us and invites us to begin again. So Jesus was with His disciples in the upper room. And while He was eating, He took the bread. And when He had given thanks, He said, take and eat, this is my body. Lord Jesus, I know that I have placed stones in the wrong places. I have chased after the wrong things. I have tried to build something for myself and not for eternity, for you. And this reminds me of the pain, Jesus, that you went through, the cost of me following you, and your body that was broken for me and for every single person here. And so this is a reminder to come back, to trust you again with everything. And so let's eat together. Then He took a cup and gave it to him and gave thanks, and He gave it to them, saying, drink of it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I never want to get familiar with Jesus. And it's a danger for me, and I'm sure for every single one of us, is that Jesus becomes familiar rather than beautiful. He becomes just normal in our life, right? He becomes just... I never want to lose my awe, and I never want to lose my wonder of Jesus. I never want to pretend to know the full extent that He went through for you and for me. And that's why we remember, that's why we do communion, is to remember. And even this is just a small little reminder, right? But for me, this isn't just something that we do. This is, for me, just a really holy moment to try and get a glimpse of what Jesus went through. Larry said that freedom isn't free, and this is the most profound realization, that our freedom wasn't free because it cost Jesus His life. It cost the penalty of sin. It cost Him His body to be broken and His blood to be shed, so that we can live in the freedom that we live under, the grace and the mercy. We get to live in this freedom, and so freedom absolutely wasn't free. It cost Jesus His life. And so even if this morning is just a small little glimpse into that reminder, Jesus, what a beautiful reminder it is. Jesus, when we've placed stones in the wrong places, forgive us. When we've built monuments in the wrong places, forgive us. When we've chased after the wrong thing, forgive us. And Jesus, even as I know that we are Can I, do you know how humbled I feel? Here we are, as a 3-year-old church from in a country that's not, I wasn't born here. I've only known this place for a few years, right? And here we are, foreigners. To be in the position that we find ourselves as a church, to be gifted this land is, it's really humbling for me, because I just have to step back and be like, Lord, this is yours. It's not mine. This is yours. And you invited me, and I feel, if I'm honest, just so overwhelmed, both with gratitude, but sometimes there's a little bit of fear sprinkled in there, because there's so much unknown. There's so many hurdles. There's so much things that we have to navigate. But you know what I know? That if God is leading us, the unknown is not unsafe. And so I need to be reminded of that. And you know what also need to be reminded is Warren, there's communion. My blood was shed, so don't fear. My blood was shed, and so don't worry. My blood was shed for you and for every single person here, so that what I'm building is going to be so beautiful. And so I'm inviting you to remember. So let's drink together. Jesus, today we lay down our misplaced stones. The stones of fear, the stones of control, the stones of success or comfort when they've taken your place. Oh, Lord, help us to pick up the stone of remembrance and remember your body that was broken, your blood that was shed. And Lord, you've been faithful through every season in the life of this church. Teach us to trust you more deeply and to obey you more fully. May the story of our lives always be that our God is faithful. And He's taken us through the most beautiful journey. And even though there were so many unknowns, what a beautiful story it is. And so, Lord, help us to remember all that you've done for us. And all God's people said, Amen.
Here's a few important things happening with our CE family.
Our food collection is coming up July 19th. This is a great opportunity to show the love of Jesus by helping provide food for families in need throughout our community. Pick up a food collection bag July 11th and 12th, fill it with food, and bring it back with you on July 18th and 19th. Together, we can make a big impact through our generosity together. A brand new church experience website is coming 2026. We'll also be adding the ability to tap your phone to connect, respond, and give during the service. These changes will be coming later in 2026 as we continue to invest improvements throughout your church so that more people can experience a full life in Jesus Christ. When you give to God through church experience, your generosity creates opportunities for people to hear the gospel, have their lives and families be forever changed by Jesus, gather in Christian community, and serve our cities together to share the love of God in dark places that need His light. You'll never find a more internal investment than pouring into God's kingdom work. Thank you for being such a generous church family. If you would like to join us, you can give your tithes and offerings in the offering bucket each weekend, or by easily setting up a recurring gift on our CE website or CE app. No matter what you choose, know that your generosity is making a difference for God's kingdom every single week.
Thank you so much for being on mission with us to help more people experience full life in Jesus Christ.
Wow, what an incredible service today. If you made the commitment during the service, We would love to celebrate with you. So head over to churchexperience.tv/connect or scan that QR code. And don't forget to stay connected with us all week long on Instagram, Facebook, on our website, or the CE app. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next Sunday. Same place, same family, new move of God. Have an awesome week.